is specializing in business messaging, and we've spent weeks creating a new presentation, and Joanne from MEF has very kindly had to share 4 slides with you, and I've got 2 minutes to go through them. So very quickly, just looking at where something like RCS fits in an omni-channel world as part of this digital transformation. So we're looking at it very quickly from a mobile operator perspective. So you can see on the left, there's about 4 billion mobile phone devices actively using SMS. There's 3.5 billion smartphones, 2.8 billion of those are Android. And so we're trying to look at what's this opportunity then around RCS, how big is it actually? So based on our research, I can't go into the depth of it, but right now, in terms of the potential reach of RCS globally, it's about 0.9 billion, 900 million globally. And just to compare that, it's about 700 million for Apple, for ABC. Everyone always asks about Apple, but that's just to put some context in there. So the one thing that we're really keen to stress on is that in terms of this business messaging environment, it's actually the operators that are dominating this right now in terms of who's making revenues. So we've got the SMS A2P market at 17 billion. That's for 2018. I'll show you what the growth is. But you can also see that in terms of actually monetizing A2P messaging, you've got Viber and you've got WhatsApp for Business. So if you look at the ecosystem where it stands, this is dominated by the operators. And based on those operators that are monetizing, they are creating an ARPU, an annual ARPU of $3.61. This is what we expect will happen in a world without RCS. So if all money and RCS doesn't happen and everything stays on A2P SMS, we expect it to grow to about 28.7 billion. You can see growth continues at a steady rate for the next 5 years. But this is what happens if we go with RCS. So this is SMS plus RCS. So in effect, you'll see $3 billion that would have been spent on SMS move over onto RCS. But due to the engagement levels, the impact of P2A and chat, the total business messaging market for SMS and RCS will be about $41 billion. And there'd be an uplift for operators of about $13 billion. So that's one very compelling reason why to go to RCS. And here's the threat, WhatsApp. This is just us playing around with numbers to give an idea of potentially how powerful and how impactful this could be. So right now, given them, this is WhatsApp for Business is less than 12 months old. It's already got more than 3 million registered businesses. 3 million. It's got 1.5 billion users. If you average that out, that's 8.3 million users in each of the 180 markets that it operates. So that's already got reasonable scale that would be quite attractive to brands. So what we're basically saying here is that within 5 years, we expect WhatsApp to potentially generate something like $11 billion. Now, we're not saying that those $11 billion will come straight out of the coffers that will be used for messaging, but potentially it could have an impact. So over those 5 years, the cumulative spend is $30 billion. Whether that's brands and enterprises finding that money from somewhere else, or increasing their budgets, or it is going to eat into that messaging spend, we don't know yet. But that's potentially how impactful this could be. There you go. 3 minutes, not too bad. So, on with me on the stage. Have you followed your pictures? You haven't. But there we go. So we've got 5 wonderfully intelligent industry experts here talk about the future of messaging. So I'll give you 10 seconds to each briefly introduce yourself and your company. So Robert, let's start with you.
Thank you, Nick. So my name is Robert Gerstmann. I'm co-founder and chief evangelist at Sinch. You might know us from our previous name, CLX Communications, but we rebranded 2 weeks ago. So it's Sinch now, based at our Stockholm office, which is also our headquarters.
I am Oscar Gallego. I head messaging and security in Vodafone Consumer Products. And I have been working in RCS for many years. So Vodafone is let's say, contributing to the charge to make RCS a reality. Based in London, I'm pleased to be here.
Hi, I'm Joanna Kohler. I'm based in Zurich, but I look after the Middle East and Africa markets. So I'm bringing more of an emerging markets perspective to this panel, I hope. And I am responsible for the commercial success of Android messages in my markets.
I'm Eugene Oxman, VP of Product at Salesforce based in San Francisco. Our goal is to help companies connect with their customers in a whole new way. And I'll show you the perspective from the customer on what they have to do to invest in their systems to make sure that they're able to respond to their customers, whether it's marketing or customer service inquiries, and take care of their needs wherever they may be.
Suresh Patel, General Manager for Messaging at Realnetworks, and we're bringing machine learning to the messaging industry and facial recognition.
Cool, thank you very much. We've got lots of questions. Well, I've shared a few questions. There's a few that they don't know that's coming. So we'll try and keep it as interactive and as fast and interesting as possible. If you do have a question, raise your hand. And not yet. And obviously we'll come to you. So let's kick this off. So, we've got to look at very briefly kind of an umbrella area around digital transformation. What impact is this having on how brands are looking to communicate with their customers? So, Eugene, let's start with you.
Brands realize that they have to compete for attention. And so they have to engage their customers wherever they may be. It could be through an app, it could be through a website, and more increasingly so through messaging. We see lots of different stats that 70% of consumers would rather talk to a bot than a person to get support. People tend to tweet to engage companies. Sometimes they get a response, sometimes they don't. And customers have very high expectations because they have this technology in their hand. They talk to their friends. They know what real-time communication is like. And when brands don't engage with them on their terms or make the customers jump through hoops or stay on the line for a very long time to get support, they're going to remember that and they're going to go to another brand. And that's why it's important for companies to invest in omnichannel and to be exactly where their customers may be and respond with useful, contextual, relevant answers to make sure that their customers are happy.
Cool. Joe, what are you seeing in the emerging markets?
I think you've covered every possible realm of that question in your answer. Specific to the emerging markets, the way that I see users utilizing these new platforms, I see them utilizing them in very interesting ways. I mean, users in African markets utilized WhatsApp for business before WhatsApp business messaging existed, right?
No way.
They were basically reaching out to their customers and doing business over WhatsApp. They didn't necessarily need that WhatsApp business messaging channel. Another example is like Instagram in Nigeria. Merchants have created like beautiful virtual marketplaces using Instagram. So I think what's interesting for me, from my perspective, is that when you put the power of these platforms into users' hands and into brands' hands, they utilize them in very creative ways. And that's what we're excited about.
So who's shaping this environment then? Is it the consumers, and as brands and as aggregators and service providers and operators, you have to reflect what the old consumer wants? Or are you going to try and be brave and leap ahead somehow and say this is what you need to have? Robert?
I definitely see it as being defined by consumer demand and brands meeting that consumer demand. In the competition with other companies in the same space, they need to delight their consumers to retain their business and to win new consumers. So it's definitely demand driven from consumers via brands to the industry at large, where service providers like Sinch, mobile networks, what have you, have the responsibility then to enable this for the enterprises.
So in terms of omnichannel, what are brands wanting today? Because obviously we're going to come on to RCS. I was going to try not to mention it for long, but I feel compelled. So, from what we're doing and what we're seeing from our research, most brands are asking about WhatsApp for business. That seems to be the cool, hot thing right now. So, is that the case you're seeing? I guess it varies in the market. It could be, I guess in Eastern Europe, it could be something like Viber. But, what's the demand now, and how are you going to shape that so that, for example, the demand increases for something like SMS, and ultimately RCS becomes something that's very attractive to brands and enterprises. Who wants to answer that one? You put your hand up first.
Just to start on that, I think having worked in all the different aspects of the value chain, I always come back down to who's actually paying. And the person often paying for this is the marketing director of the enterprise brand. And these guys, these teams have got lots of different channels available to them. And they're always going to pick the most effective channel. But I think what we need to do as an industry is help them work out what's the most effective channel for what kind of interaction the consumer wants. And then increasingly, and one of the things we're thinking about is, when I think about the context of that conversation, it's the context of the conversation for that product, but also the context of that conversation with that consumer. That consumer may have bought lots of different products from you, and you need to take that into account and reflect that context into that particular dialogue.
Yeah, and you brought this up before. In a way, there's so much, the velocity of our lives have increased. And the way that the value that I see in enterprise messaging is speed and specificity, right? And the brands have to get that specificity. They need to nail that. Yeah.
I think actually there are three factors that we need to look into.
You might need to speak up because we're competing with...
It's not a problem at all. For a Spaniard, it's very easy to speak up. So actually, I think there are three factors that we need to look into here. The first one is the reach. Let's not deny it. I mean, reach is a key factor because as a brand, you want to reach as much customers as you want in as many places as you can. Now, if we look to the second one is trust, in the sense that what it looks like a no-brainer from the reach point of view becomes poisonous, either because of brand contamination, because you are using a channel that has a strong brand, or another matters, and I don't need to elaborate because we all watch the news and so on. Then the third point that we need to lever is there is an ecosystem that it comes together. I mean, yes, we have different players that add layers into the different ecosystems, like for example, payments and so on. It's great. How we put it all together so the experience for a brand and a customer is seamless, and it doesn't take like a very complex ecosystem, both from the operation, monetization, and also user experience point of view, those are key. And that is where I think SMS is a cracking channel. It's just it got old a little bit, with all the respect. And actually we have a great opportunity to replace it with something that stands for the same criteria, and it ticks the box of these three aspects I just talked about, and this is RCS.
So let's just dissect what you said very briefly. So you mentioned scale. So obviously some SMS, there's no qualms about that.
Sure.
It's got the greatest reach. RCS, though, is obviously pretty much Android only. So in the omni-channel world, are we having to revise brands' expectations of what can be happened in messaging, and that it is going to be and it will remain fragmented?
I don't think so. Sorry, you may want to.
No, go on.
I don't think so. I think it's a matter, as I said, you rush into decisions, you make mistakes. I am totally confident.
We haven't rushed RCS. Let's be clear.
That's certain. That's certain, and it's a point taken by everyone in the ecosystem. I think Google and Samsung have done an amazing job to have clients everywhere in Android. Don't underestimate the power of Android, because except for geographies, very important ones, Android is the main platform for customers in a smartphone. Then point number two, yes, it has been slow. I see the ecosystem very closely, I follow it, and I think this year we're going to make a huge difference in key markets, both in the geographies, in emerging geographies, and in fixed geographies. And then the third one is, I have a conflict, and I tell you as a customer, I used to have an iPhone, I have an Android device now, and I change from one to another. So, and it's a question back to everyone to reflect. Don't you feel too crowded when you have one option from the operating system provider, another one from messaging from, I don't know, from WhatsApp, for example, and another one. What will be the expectations from a brand is that you need to be very careful who you choose to partner with, not to cause havoc and come omni-channel, overloading the customer. That's something we need all to reflect, and I do apologize.
I was just going to add that I do think that some folks have felt the pain of the time that it's taken for RCS to develop. However, I do commend the GSMA and the operator community, because it's an open ecosystem. It's standards based. It's not a walled garden, and everyone can come and play there, which I think makes it much more powerful and eventually will make it the most ubiquitous.
I think also the complexity involved in everything to do with RCS is often overlooked. We also independent. We're looking in, and we feel your pain.
Well, what I would say is consumers ultimately don't care. I don't think most of them even know what RCS really is, but they do know messaging. They know their favorite messaging app. And the companies have to reach out to the consumers wherever they may be. My patterns in San Francisco are dominated by iMessage. When I go to Asia, it's all WhatsApp or Line. In Europe, it's different. And so companies will have to reach out to partners that can help them aggregate and ultimately make sense. Another element here is the identity aspect of messaging. Is it my phone number? Is it my handle? Is it my email? And it's really annoying when, let's say, I book a flight, I get an email confirmation, then a text confirmation, then something else. And that's why companies will have to invest in making sure that they're not overwhelming their consumers with spam, with irrelevant and outdated information. And so that's the investments that we have to make as solution providers. Because again, every consumer already has a preference. They have their favorite app, they live inside that app, and they expect to be reached. When I went to Taiwan, I got a really good driver. He handed me a business card, and all he had was his Line handle. I had to download that app in order to communicate to him. He didn't care. And that's really how businesses need to think about it. Reach out and be where your customers are.
But, see, that's an interesting point. That's what industry says. But that doesn't mean that the customers want you to reach out to them on that channel. So that's why I think SMS has become such a good channel for A2P, because everyone else has gone off on everything else. So it's kind of left it clear. So then to suddenly say WhatsApp for business is going to be amazing, I'm not saying, but potentially consumers don't want that. It's the same with Facebook. They don't want messages. They want that for friends and family. That's ultimately what they want. Research that we've done showed that I think 8% of consumers across the UK, US, Germany, and Netherlands showed that 8% of people wanted WhatsApp, businesses to communicate with WhatsApp, 8% for Facebook Messenger. This is small. RCS had something like 15%. This is something that we described in an online panel. But that shows that social media's been social, not with businesses. So that's what I think, I know it's going to change market on market, but as aggregators, operators, these are something that you've got to recognize and acknowledge when you're communicating in this omni-channel world with your clients.
I mean, just to address that point, I think you're right. And I think from the same research that you're talking about, Nick, you're saying that consumers want their issue to be resolved within 10 minutes. 66% of consumers want their issue to be resolved in 10 minutes. So from their perspective, it's effectiveness that they want. I have an issue, I just want it dealt with. And they will naturally choose with that brand what the right channel is for that brand. So I always talk about the credit card example. You want your fraud alert to come to you pretty much immediately. You don't want anything to get in the way of that. And you pick the right channel and the company that gives you that. So I think I come back to the idea that I think it's going to be contextual in terms of what you want and the channel that they use to talk to you.
I have a point in here. Let's step back. I think one key motivation that messaging in general is going to become a killer, and I think you mentioned in the very beginning, is applications. We have a problem with applications. They're expensive. They are difficult to develop. It's very difficult to insource the expertise in the companies because it's something that is difficult to get the right one and to keep up with the technologies. I think we have a unique opportunity. Now, I have a question to myself. Do I want to mix social media and banking? Just to answer your question, I don't know. I have a clear opinion. My banking doesn't come together with meeting up my friends later on. So actually, people have different channels. Like we have researches that actually when people want to have a work conversation, they use certain channels and then another channel. So I'm not going to debate about the omni-channel because that's a reality. It's not. I mean, the people who we are working in RCS and being in RCS, who Vodafone, the operators. I mean, and the many messaging partners we work with. I mean, at the end of the day, we are not imposing that there is one channel. We are just saying what values that channel stands for. And this is what I said before. Is it suitable for 99.9%? No, not even 80% probably of the total communication. But I have to say that the values that RCS stands for, and I need to repeat this twice, I'm sorry, we need to perpetuate them because they are right. They are right. We did it right. We had the right framework, and actually is respected and liked by our customers. So why are we gonna give it to another channel?
I think it's...
Well, I would add, let's add another layer to this conversation, and that's artificial intelligence and getting useful information. There's one aspect, if you think about marketing, that's coming through SMS. But if you need support, you want more context. You want to be able to take more action. On my way to Barcelona, my luggage got lost. Nothing, right? I could have gotten a text notification in 140 characters, but what do I do next? Are you going to get it to me? What's the follow-up? And this is where AI is going to play a role, whether it's going to be on the client side, where there's some sort of a digital assistant that's able to read those messages and make sense of everything that's going on, or it could be the business that is really collecting lots of different data sources and making those actions relevant for me. And this is going to be a really interesting competitive race, and that's why I'm really excited about it, because each side is going to make the other better, and consumers are going to get higher and higher in expectations. Yes, SMS is ubiquitous, but it's not rich. And after a certain point, once I've had rich interactions with Facebook Messenger, I want something similar coming from other brands. And if it means interacting with them on Facebook with rich content, I would rather do that than just get 140 boring characters.
Robert, you're going to say something.
Yeah, more back to the previous point we're making. So I agree with the strengths that RCS has inherently over many of the OTTs. At the same time, though, coverage or usage is a huge advantage of WhatsApp over RCS today. So there's also, for me, or for where we're coming from, a clear sense of urgency. If MNOs want to keep the lion's share of A2P revenues, it's really time to get the service out there, with high urgency, because we're seeing a lot of our customers. They're looking, where can I do rich messaging today? And that answer is not RCS, to be honest, not at scale.
But it also shows the demand for richness, because there's also increasing traffic for MMS in certain markets, and I guess in the US in particular as well. Yeah. So it shows that brands do want to evolve. Speaking of evolving, do we have any questions? We don't have too long left. We kind of covered everything in 25 minutes.
Before the questions, I mean, we are talking about RCS like something is going to happen. I mean, it's live in 8 markets. There has been 3 campaigns going on live. We have 3 countries, full coverage, joining Japan in full coverage. So it's not something that is happening tomorrow. Even in emerging markets, we have a great coverage growing up in Africa. So, and in certain geographies in South America. So it's not something that is coming. Is there. And also I would say that it's not only down to operators. I think we all in the ecosystem need to grow. And here I have to say, going back to the point, chatbots, artificial intelligence, and all the aspects, from the data to the NLP, to Learning which paths should be suppressed in a conversation, that needs to be modernized. Onboarding processes, a lot of things. So I think I agree that social media is super well posed, and we need to recognize that reality that wasn't in there when we did SMS. I have to say that there is a reality in there that is an opportunity. So, and in terms of experience, just to finish the point, it matches the same experience, if not better. I look at WhatsApp business messaging. I encourage you, if you want, I show you some of the campaigns. The experience is far better in RCS. So again,
I agree.
yeah, it's not about competing in here.
Yeah.
It's complementary.
There will be omni-channels and there will be very different platforms available for those channels and very different end-to-end experiences for the consumer. And to your point, I mean, you want to be able to finish your transaction inside. You don't want to be sent outside to finish a payment. And so whether that transaction is actually a payment or confirmation of your address so that your bag can get to you, you want to complete it inside. Yeah.
We have a question.
So this race to get more
We might, hang on. Okay.
Thank you. In this race to get more data, fight over the customer's data, where's the forum on trying to protect the customer and make sure privacy is a concern? Doesn't seem like the word privacy and is
Could you
even
repeat
thought
the
about in
question,
this forum.
please? Could you repeat the question, please?
I can. So in terms of on the channel and engagement, who's protecting the customer and who's thinking about privacy?
Can I? So, I mean, from our perspective, when we work with operators, when we work with other people in the value chain, the number one concern is privacy. That's the one thing. There's lots of guidelines on. There's lots of direction in terms of what we should do. And everything that we do has to be compliant with all of the regulations, not just in Europe, but in the US, and everyone has different interpretations of these things. So that's like the lowest common denominator in all of this is to get the data privacy right. And, you know, when it comes to machine learning and things like that, especially where it's all about the data, it's even more important. And that's how you look at the data, how you process the data, where you store the data. So it's a key factor in everything that we do.
So just make a comparison here. So in terms of customers, clients of Vodafone that are looking to use RCS, what are you saying to them around GDPR and whether they've got an active mobile database pre-May 2018?
Your data will never be monetized. This is written in our contracts. Okay? That's the customer promise that every mobile operator, the majority, I cannot talk because I don't know all the geographies, made. So it's not about that we are going to use it for targeting advertisement, etc., etc. Actually, we build our platforms in a way that they are stateless from the customer data point of view. The only data we keep is how the interactions are happening to give a better experience, but it's never the user plane, it's never the data. And that's the customer promise we had in SMS, and that's the customer promise that we are having for RCS.
So with RCS, I mean, in terms of forecasts, we're predicting the market will be worth about 16 billion in 5 years. That's just from a termination rate model. But if you then introduce something like chatbot search and potentially advertising, that could treble. So, I mean, that's really where we think the real big opportunity is. So, you know, how would that kind of affect your clients as they move into RCS, knowing that there could be this huge mountain of money available?
I don't want to monopolize, but as Samsung out there, you have an example where they have an application store, which is not an application store, it's a chatbot store that you can bring it onto live. I mean, I leave it to you, but I know that we are working together in the ecosystem to have it in all the clients. I think this is fundamental, but then I just have one thing. It goes wider than the application. is where the customers search for things. That's what we need to think. If we want to think big and we want to realize all this potential, we shall look into that. And I think this is an area that we all together
Right, it's not just the A to P, but also the P to A. Yeah, I mean, just the discoverability aspect is critical. And it can't just be a one-way conversation.
I mean, in our forecast, P2A accounts for about 80% of ARPU by 2023.
I mean, one of the things that we see right now, we're looking at reputations of senders. One of the things that we're trying to do increasingly start to think about, well, what's coming back in the other direction? Working on behalf of an enterprise to say, well, how are your customers responding back to the messages that you send out? And then what can we do to help contextualize that? So what's the sentiment? What are they trying to achieve? And again, it's what you're saying, Oscar. It's all about trying to deliver the best experience for them.
And to give another perspective, when you deal with customer service, on average, it costs about $20 when somebody calls into a call center. If you can resolve that through RCS, a rich interaction, where you don't have to jump around from app to app or go into your email or log back into a website and get everything done within that transaction over a couple of 100 kilobytes, that's a tremendous savings that companies and brands are going to be willing to pay for.
Absolutely. Any more questions? Can't believe there's just been one. You must have been doing a very good job. So, we're nearly out of time. Ignore that if you can see that. No, the chant, it's gone.
And this is a question for the audience, really, and maybe by show of hands. How many of you have actually seen an RCS in motion, in work? I'd like you to just note that. That's the industry. So if you talk about market adoption, it's you know, we talk about it here. If this hasn't taken off as fast, then how is an enterprise is going to adopt it? And how long will that take?
Thanks.
I mean, I really think it starts with network enablement. You know, carriers, whoever they choose to work with, need to get their networks RCS enabled. Then come the handset piece to get ultimately clients out there that can you know, consume RCS. As Oscar was saying, I think we're seeing that coming now this year. I mean, A2P RCS is still only available on a very small number of networks. P2P is a little bit wider spread, but A2P is still rare. So I think that's the key piece. That's the underlying infrastructure that needs to be rolled out. I think luckily we're seeing that now. Then you can argue why it's taken so long, but you know, that's happening now. I think that's the underpinning thing, that you get coverage so that ultimately the investments that the enterprises are doing have a decent ROI. Because you know, if it's only a very small subscriber base that you can touch, you know, you can do trials, but mass adoption is the thing that will drive this.
We were talking about exactly the same thing 10, 12 years ago about mobile marketing. No brands really want to target Vodafone. They don't want to target AT&T, Verizon. They want to target the country. And that's kind of what's happened. So we kind of think once we see UK go live, US will go live, obviously Japan's gone live, and several other markets are going to go live, that will have a huge uptake on other operators and other markets, obviously the work that Google's doing. So we expect it to accelerate, especially for the second half of this year. But we're running out of time, so just very briefly, so our last question is, what do you expect messaging to look like in 10 years' time? So Robert, let's start with you.
First of all, I think SMS will still be there. Probably not the dominant channel, but I think some applications will still be using text. Then I think there will be a number of channels, both RCS and big OTTs, that will have A2P messaging going over them. I think the market share, the relative market share between these, will largely be determined in the, in the next coming years, 1, 2, 3 years. How fast will RCS adoption, both P2P but A2P especially, get going? I think that's going to be super decisive for the relative market share. Obviously, what Apple will do is a big question mark still. I think that's going to be a huge impacting factor. And I think it's really up to the networks. They own this today with all the revenues going over text messaging. Will the networks continue to capture much of the share, or will the likes of Apple, Facebook, Google capture the vast majority of the money? I think that's going to be determined by the adoption rate that we are seeing in the next 2 years.
Okay.
I just want to say, we focus a lot in the what, which is to exchange messages. It can change a lot. And to be honest, but who will be the Vodafones, the Google, the Facebooks of the future? I don't know. What I'm pretty sure is that we will need to invest in the experience. And I think there are 2 technologies that I think are very important. The first one is this mixed reality. More and more is going to become a reality. So how we can target customers without spamming them in something that is so intimate. And then the second thing is going to be merging voice and messaging. More and more you are going to have interfaces. I'm thinking running and having my headset with an eSIM, okay, sort of all connected. I want to have the messaging there. We need to start to think in omni-channel, not only as messaging, but how messaging can convert to something spoken to customers. So I think the experience will take very important. Regarding SMS, I'm sorry, I disagree. We are going to an all-IP world. I think machine-to-machine makes sense. I think that we will evolve to IP, and I think RCS is a very good candidate to be there, even an evolution of that.
Okay, Joe?
I'm glad you brought up the headset example, because when I thought about this 10-year time frame, I actually thought how ridiculous it is that we're all wandering around holding these screens in our hands and bumbling into each other while we're doing that and walking around the Fira. In 10 years, I hope that there's extremely personalized AI, so that the interaction between myself and a brand is actually quite personal. Obviously, we have privacy challenges with that, but those are not insurmountable. And I think it's a wear piece, or it's something in my ear, or part of my eyeglass. And I hope we get there.
Eugene?
I think behind the scenes, AI is going to play an incredibly important role. If you look at the evolution of the iPhone or the Android phone, when it first shipped, you had that keyboard. It wasn't really smart, but now it practically types sentences for you. You can also talk into it. It has autocomplete. It can read your messages. It can fill in automated fields with your name, credit card information. And you're going to see exponential growth in capabilities of what AI is going to do as you communicate. So your client might be doing some filtering for you. It might be doing autocomplete on your behalf. It might help friends and restaurants schedule dinner appointments that are appropriate for everybody. The experience is going to change, but it's going to go in the right direction, and it's ultimately going to save us a lot of times. And I'm fully convinced that brands that do not invest in this are going to get replaced by startups that do, and that delight their customers with such an amazing experience.
Josh?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think artificial intelligence can play a very big part in terms of where we're going. But I also, as I started my talk earlier, and I thought 10 years back, 10 years back we didn't have Uber, we didn't have Just Eat, so in 10 years' time, who knows? I think our existing customer experiences will be disrupted again. As they get disrupted, I think if we utilize the new technologies, the new channels, and then utilize artificial intelligence, I think we'll be having very different conversations with each other.
Cool. Well, we've run out of time, so I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming. I hope you found this useful and interesting. Please join me in thanking our panelists for their time. Thank you, guys.